Did you know that the Yakuza used to have office buildings? Like with nameplates and everything? They even had books with member registration details and organizational charts. Did you know that there used to be 184,000 Yakuza across Japan? Or did you know that they once mobilized disaster relief faster than the government? After a severe earthquake in 1995, they sent trucks full of water and diapers to Kobe days before official aid could make it. So, if you're like me, you might show up to Kabukicho, look around and say, where the heck are all the Yakuza? Well, let's take a look tonight and see if we can figure that out. We like to call the Yakuza the Japanese Mafia, and it's a pretty accurate term, but it's slightly missing the key detail that made the whole thing work in the first place. The Yakuza were legible. And what I mean by that, see, the Italian Mafia was imported, right? Italian immigrants locked out of legitimate institutions built their own, criminal but functional. But the Yakuza were indigenous. They weren't introduced to Japanese society, they were an institution formed from it. Heck, the legendary Yamaguchi-gumi's headquarters in Kobe was listed in phone directories. Their neighbors brought noise complaints, which I can't imagine people doing to speakeasies or trap houses. And that's a critical point here. This visibility served as a critical function for the state. It put a face to criminal liability in the area. If a mugging occurred in a specific district, the local police knew exactly which office was responsible for that territory. So they knew who to talk to either discipline their rank or eliminate the competition. So, what was talking to the Yakuza actually like? Well, for civilians, it's a pretty familiar picture. Let's go back to the 1980s, the peak Japan bubble economy years. You open a bar in Tokyo, one night a man in a nice suit visits. He's polite and treats you with genuine respect. He even brings flowers to celebrate your shop opening. He does, however, suggest you might benefit from protection. Now, if you've seen Goodfellas, you're thinking, this is the part where I pay or my windows get broken. But Yakuza protection money was a bit weirder than that. Known as mikajime, it was extortion, okay? But it was also sometimes an actual service. You paid a monthly fee, and in exchange you got a phone number. Is there a drunk guy that won't leave? Call him up. A rival bar sending trouble for a stereotypical 80s bar rumble? Call him up. Someone owes you money and won't pay? Definitely call him up. Putting it in American terms, it's a bit like the Pinkerton detective agency model. A privatized operator for when you need help with something that is technically legal, but the legal system might be a bit slower than you want. For example, collecting debts without the hassle of paperwork, or dispute settlement, out of court, shall we say, or enforcers hired by a real estate developer to persuade stubborn landowners to sell. Nothing anyone could prove is untoward, especially if you scare the heck out of witnesses. So what you're buying is problem solving from people who are sometimes, and I need you to sit down for this, sometimes able to move quicker than the lightning speed of bureaucracy. And the Japanese government kinda knew it. This is why the old Yakuza occupies such a weird spot in our collective culture. It certainly wasn't good. It was an extortion empire after all, but it's an extortion empire that was a known quantity. The criminal syndicates would punish unauthorized crime in their area because random muggings brings police attention, and if you're running a long-term racket, chaos is your enemy. Oh, and they hate drugs. If a drug dealer, or what's worse, a gang of non-Japanese drug dealers, shows up in your neighborhood, two birds, one stone. They chase out the rival gangs only to be thanked by the locals and the police. And that's how they started to run on this story or fable. It was called the Ninkyo myth. Chivalry, order, crush the strong and help the weak. It was playing at Robin Hood. The Yamaguchi-gumi even published a newsletter, which is super corporate in and of itself, with guidelines to avoid petty crime like purse snatching. They called it shameful behavior for a modern-day Renaissance gangster with standards. But it wasn't altruism. No, they just knew that they were playing a PR game, staying the lesser of two evils while staying profitable. Now that was a precarious balancing act, and they pulled off this balancing act for decades. The Yakuza really were a fixture of society. In a weird sense, they were reliable. The Yakuza were also significant players even in the legitimate economy: construction, real estate, entertainment, and so on. At the time, it wasn't so much the underworld as it was a reality of society. But then the bubble popped. December 29, 1989 marks the all-time high of the Nikkei 225, which is the Japanese equivalent of the Dow Jones Index. Japan was riding high. Times were booming, champagne was popping, and good times were had by all. People woke up on December 30th to find the stock market was still high, but not quite as high. But surely it would come back up, right? A little while later, in 1991, people woke up and realized their economy wasn't coming back. Their economy was, in fact, gone. The stock market was down 60%, land values had collapsed, and when investigators started tracing the bad loans, the ones that had nearly brought the banking system down to its knees, they found that they could connect a concerning amount of the bad loans to the Yakuza. The gangs had become such an integral part of society that they were able to contribute to its collapse. Suddenly, the evil looked a lot less like the lesser of two evils and more just like, well, evil. But Japan didn't solve its Yakuza problem the way you'd expect. See, post-World War II, America oversaw the creation of Japan's post-war constitution. Before the war, Imperial Japan jailed political dissidents just for assembling. To prevent history from repeating itself, the new constitution would have measures that explicitly prevented the government from punishing individuals just for associating with others. In general, this is a pretty good rule. But it turns out that this meant that Japan couldn't make joining the Yakuza a crime, even if the criminals went so far as to create a nice tidy membership list. So Japan took one look at the sprawling underworld empires and said, "Fine, you exist. But you don't get to exist with electricity. If you live in Japan, there's a good chance that you've signed up for a bank account, a mobile phone, or even a gym membership. And when you did so, you may have seen the clause where you pledge that you're not affiliated with antisocial forces. And that's not just the name of my high school emo band. That's the contractual garlic for the vampire that is the Yakuza. Essentially, life becomes managed by a series of checkpoints that go, hey, you're not Yakuza, are you? This all happened slowly but surely. National laws increased the pressure until 2009, when all 47 prefectures in Japan each passed their own bills over a period of a couple years. It was now illegal for anyone to knowingly provide benefit to a designated gang member. And benefit is such a vague term that people figured that even delivering a pizza to a known Yakuza member would technically be against the law. And Yakuza members quickly found themselves trapped. Real estate companies wouldn't rent to them if they could even get a bank account in the first place. Car rentals, golf courses, hotels, all of them would refuse to do business with anybody who was a known associate. Any businesses that didn't cut ties with gang affiliates risked police penalties or public naming and shaming. So, while you might not be in literal prison, you're in a figurative one. And if you think, well, I'll just quit the Yakuza and become a good little boy, well, not so fast. Even if you quit, you're treated as an active member for years. In theory, this rule is in place so a Yakuza can't renounce their gang ties, sign a contract, then quickly rejoin their gang. But the result is a massive blocker for anyone seeking true rehabilitation. Even though you've left your gang affiliation, every door in the city is locked, except for the one back into the life you just left. It was brutally effective. In 1963, the Yakuza had 184,000 members. 30 years later, in 1991, that number shrank down to 90,000. Another 30 years and we're down to under 20,000, and only half of those are full members. That's a 90% drop. And these aren't even new recruits. 5% of the Yakuza are in their 20s, and more than half are over 50. The plan worked. Good game, pack it up, fellas. The Yakuza were dying. Now, you're probably saying, wait, did young Japanese men simply stop wanting easy money and the thrill of criminal enterprise? To which I'd say, what? No. Why would you even suggest that? It's really weird of you. What actually happened was the birth of the Hangure, or half-gray. The Hangure were short-lived. Appearing in the 2000s and peaking in the 2010s, these groups bridged the gap between a classic Yakuza and what would come next. Bikers, club bouncers, amateur fighters, pretty much anyone who looked tough enough to intimidate people. These people realized that the anti-social forces laws specifically targeted designated organizations, and they said, aha, if we do a terrible job at organizing, you can't touch us. And it was kinda true. The law didn't have the same tools to limit organizations without a formal hierarchy, an official boss, or a bizarrely public office. So, this loose group of delinquents became a go-between for the Yakuza. For anything that required a clean record, the Yakuza could use the Hangure as a mask. The Hangure didn't have the Yakuza's pretense of refinement. While traditional gangs avoided random chaos, the Hangure just didn't care. They earned a reputation for brutal, unpredictable violence, like the 2012 Roppongi incident where the Hangure beat a man to death with metal bats in a club full of witnesses. If the old Yakuza ran their business like a corporation with a registered headquarters, then Hangure were like contractors that ran out of a local garage. You could hire them so that if push came to shove, you could always say, hey, that wasn't us. But the Hangure were still somewhat visible. They had reputations. They hung out in specific clubs. They had leaders you could identify. The law was going to catch up with them soon if they kept making such a scene. So the next step? Turn crime into a gig economy. You know, like Uber Eats. And here enters the modern day boogeyman, the tokuryū, short for tokumei ryūdogata hanzai, or anonymous fluid crime, which is notable for somehow sounding kind of cool and kind of gross at the same time. The National Police Agency uses this term to describe a new form of crime. See, with the Yakuza, they had a building you could point to, and the Hangure might be like running a business out of a garage, but at the end of the day, that means they still had an address. But with the tokuryū, things get weird. It's not a stereotypical gang, it's a loosely connected network of individuals. Maybe you have a couple of people in Tokyo, a recruiter in Osaka, and a money mule in Nagoya. And these are all managed by a handler sitting overseas. The moment one person gets arrested, the handler just drops another person into their place. The concept of leadership loses its traditional meaning, and the labor is expendable. So, who would sign up for this? Well, imagine you're John Smith, a 22-year-old Japanese college student. You barely have enough money for instant ramen from the convenience store, and you see all of your friends on social media. They're partying, going on vacation, and whispering about your strangely American name. In between photos of selfies of girls you wish you could take out on dates, you see an ad. Part-time work available, up to 50,000 yen a day. Beginners welcome. Start today. You click on it. It's too good to be true, but you're a theoretical straw man I made up for the sake of narration, which is honestly too bad because you've just encountered yami baito, or shadow part-time work. They direct you to their application process on a separate, encrypted app. Just when you're wondering if they're legitimate, they ask you some questions that, under a normal job application, would be pretty normal. Your identification and your family's contact information. You know, for emergencies. Your first job is pretty small, generally just delivering a package or taking pictures of a neighborhood. If you're particularly curious, they may admit that it's a gray zone, but just a little bit. You do the job, you get paid, and everything is good. Until you try to quit. Then the professionalism drops and they reveal exactly what you've been doing. Maybe you've been transporting narcotics, or stolen goods, or bribed money. You get the picture. Now they have your ID, your participation, and your family's information. You are stuck. If you back out, they threaten to report you. If you go to the police, they threaten your family. It's such an effective set of leverage that these part-timers will often go until they get caught. The old Yakuza extracted money through ongoing relationships. They preferred to siphon resources over time and valued stable operations. But the tokuryū extracts labor and silence through fear and data. You comply because you have to. Your own identity is being weaponized against you. You can't go to the police. You don't even know who's doing it to you. The only person you know who's done a crime is yourself. And that's how this bare-bones criminal organization gets fresh recruits. Okay, now it's time to introduce Luffy. Yeah, like One Piece. Let's go back a couple of years. The name tokuryū was given in 2023 once the police understood what they were dealing with. But between 2021 and 2023, law enforcement was absolutely down the rabbit hole in these bizarre, unprecedented crimes. Japan saw wave after wave of robberies that didn't match usual patterns. These crimes were aggressive, targeted, sometimes violent, but the perpetrators were young men with uncanny discipline, and they didn't even understand their own plans, much less were they able to explain why someone in another town over was doing the exact same thing. The police were hardly surprised to learn that the people doing robberies on the ground weren't the masterminds. They were recruits from yami baito pipelines. They'd meet for the first time at the train station nearest the crime scene, execute the robbery, hand loot to a collector, and disperse. And when police arrested them, and let's be honest, they were arrested frequently because they were amateurs naive enough to click on sketchy internet ads, they couldn't flip on their boss because they didn't know who he was. They knew a Telegram handle, and by that time, it was long deleted. Occasionally, the police would get breaks though. They finally found who they thought could be a mastermind. He was providing addresses, timing, and contingency plans to the troops. But here's the thing. That guy didn't know anything else. He just followed directions from his boss. And his boss had just burned his Telegram handle. And for the first time, the police saw this organization for what it was, streamlined and modern. Above the bosses, leaders who kept their hands clean. They didn't show up to the crime scenes, they didn't touch the money, they didn't even need to be in Japan. It was like trying to catch water with your hands, and hence the weird name, Anonymous Fluid Crime. The police did eventually get far enough up the pole to see the top. They called the criminals the Luffy Group, as the mastermind used the name of an anime character as a pseudonym. The Luffy Group's command layer operated from a detention center in Manila, the Philippines. The guy who was causing all of this chaos was in prison in the Philippines. Prisoner Yuki Watanabe had managed to get his hands on some smartphones and was running the whole operation via Telegram. His sheer skill is terrifying. Building a resilient criminal network is something that even men on the outside struggle to do. But not Luffy's tokuryū. No matter who goes down, the network persists. The leadership, the muscle, the recruiters, you name it, the tokuryū goes on. So this is why I said the tokuryū crime style is the gig economy version. Leadership is remote, workers are disposable, and the mascot is a cartoon character. So where does that leave the actual Yakuza? 1.8 billion. Not yen, but US dollars. That's the tune of the damage that the tokuryū reportedly caused through its fraud, its robbery, narcotics, and other schemes. But if you think about it, that doesn't really make sense. If the gang is a skeleton crew run by someone overseas, how can they target their crimes so effectively? There's no way a guy in prison in Manila knows which house you need to rob and which phone number you have to call. This is when our good old friend the Yakuza steps out of the shadows clapping menacingly. They were never gone. In fact, their current form allows them to exert power without risk. When the tokuryū wants to commit a crime, they need help. And that's the sort of help the Yakuza can provide. The Yakuza can share a target list, or meibo. This is a decades-old ledger detailing a family's status, possessions, and current condition. Or maybe the Yakuza can provide tools to do the job, or offer their services to launder the money afterward. Plus, they can guarantee your safety in their turf, or even be your muscle when you need to keep your grunts in line. All along, the Yakuza had acted as silent partners for the tokuryū groups, a Yakuza boss sitting on decades of intelligence and resources, all in exchange for a cut of the profit as a consulting fee. The Yakuza boss never touches phones, never meets robbers, and has no other digital footprint. Traditional Yakuza operated on a level that was selfishness, pretending to be altruism. But now that they have an indirect role, that seems to be gone, with the Yakuza supporting the tokuryū committing elder fraud and street-level robberies. And unfortunately, The tokuryū also have no issues here. The handlers don't care who gets hurt, replacing members is just another Tuesday for them, so they can be as predatory as they want, and that's how 4 Japanese men were eventually arrested for a murder that took place in January 2023. Previously, there had been a rash of particularly violent break-ins, but this time got out of hand. When their target refused to tell them where the valuables were, their boss, who was on the phone with them during the robbery, told them to hit the target as hard as they could. So they hit the target 10 to 15 times with a crowbar. Their target was a 90-year-old woman. The thieves got away with an insulting amount for an abhorrent act, all while the mastermind was in a detention cell in Manila. Luffy is no longer tip-tapping on a smuggled smartphone in Manila. He's rightfully in Japanese custody, as are the 4 Japanese perpetrators awaiting trial for robbery resulting in death. The man who ran an empire from a detention cell is now facing the possibility of execution. In colonial India, the British offered bounties for dead cobras. Enterprising locals started breeding cobras for the bounty. The government eventually caught on and canceled the program, and the breeders, up to their knees in a pile of now worthless snakes, released their cobra armies into the world. The cobra population ended up higher than before. And if we're talking about being up to our knees in worthless snakes, these young men fit the bill. Japan is sort of in a similar situation where the solution created a new problem. Unfortunately, Luffy was not the only person running a tokuryū outfit, and even post-arrest, the damage caused by tokuryū gangs continues to rise. Major crimes like homicide, robbery, and assault hit 14,600 incidents in 2024, an 18% increase over a single year. Over that same year, fraud losses grew to 72 billion. That's 196 million yen stolen every single day. All that is to say, things are getting a little worse. About 77% of Japanese people believe security has deteriorated over the past decade. Japan had the Yakuza in a vice grip. Financial strangulation, social exclusion, relentless enforcement, they were unbelievably effective in taking power away from a centuries-old criminal institution. But in doing so, criminals were incentivized to change their shape. Becoming invisible, flexible, and anonymous, these groups were able to shock Japan with a previously unknown brand of crime. The tokuryū is what evolved from this crackdown. It's what happens when you destroy an organization but leave the members separated and unable to integrate with normal society. Ex-Yakuza with no legitimate options become mentors and guides for tokuryū youth because they have no other way to eat. The tokuryū have shown that any plans to deal with criminal organizations have to be well thought out and complete. Otherwise, the next step could be even worse. Did you know that the Yakuza still have offices? There's about a dozen in Kabukicho today, but now, instead of being front and center, they're a little more discreet. Their member books are mostly empty, and the head count is lower than it's ever been before. When crimes happen in the streets below their windows, the scams, debt traps, and robberies planned through Telegram, they say it's not their business. The old Yakuza might have handled it. They might have disciplined the rank or eliminated the competition. That was the deal. That was the whole point of having an office. The new thing? It's not their business. They just take a consulting fee and look the other way.